by numerous historical records, it's clear that the Jews were in that area from time immemorial. And what people don't know is they never left. What happened was this: in 134 AD, there was a Messiah, Bar Kokhba, and he was a leader of the Jews. He was obviously not the Messiah, and he lost. And the Romans had had enough by then of the constant revolts against their rule. And so they expelled the Jews from the area, and they renamed Judea and Samaria Palestine. They got the word Palestine from the Bible. It was the name Philistine, of the enemies of the Israelites in the Bible. But there was no historical connection between anybody in the area and the actual Philistines. So that's something that the Palestinians claim today. It's false. There was never, even after the Romans renamed the area Palestine, there was, excuse me, there were never any Palestinians.
You see, Allah's curse, Allah's curse. No. Just for anyone who didn't follow, Robert had pneumonia a little while back and has still been slowly recovering. So
slowly.
But I have to say, Ali Dawa did pray, did have his thousands and thousands of fans praying for us to get diseases, and lo and behold, Robert got pneumonia a couple years later. So it's the proof.
A couple years later,
it's the proof.
Wow.
So now you're going to make me forget. Where were we? The Palestinians. There were never any Palestinians, David. It's like Staten Island. You know, there's this place, Staten Island, and it's the name of an area. But there is no nationality, Staten Islanders. There is no separate nation that has ever been there. It's just the name of an area, and that's what Palestine was all these years. Even if you go to 1948, when Israel was founded, you look at the newspapers of the day, you look at the United Nations deliberations, you look at the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel, you look at the opposing states that wanted to destroy Israel and went to war with it in 1948, there is not one mention of Palestinians. And so everybody talks about how this is Palestinian land. There weren't even any Palestinians until the 1960s. They were invented in the 1960s. The KGB and Yasser Arafat invented the Palestinians in the 1960s because in those days, the world was on Israel's side. And all of global public opinion thought that Israel was this tiny underdog, courageous, tiny little state facing 22 hostile Arab states that all wanted to destroy it. And not to mention the non-Arab Muslim states that wanted to destroy it, like Iran, Pakistan, and all the rest. And so what they did was, in order to manipulate global public opinion, created the Palestinian Liberation Organization and started talking about the Palestinians, who were an even smaller people who were being oppressed by the terrible Israelis. And it's worked wonderfully. Jimmy Carter then strong-armed Menachem Begin, the Prime Minister of Israel, to accept the existence of a people called the Palestinians in the 70s. And in the 90s, at the Oslo Accords, Bill Clinton got the Israelis to agree to accept in principle that a Palestinian state would be created. But the idea that this is occupied territory would have to mean that it was originally somebody else's territory. That is not true either. The fact is that the Ottoman Empire, from which AP and I come, that fell in the time of World War I, right after World War I. And one of the last things the Ottoman Empire did was cede the territory that is now Israel to the League of Nations, the precursor to the United Nations. The League of Nations then gave it to Britain in order for Britain to create a Jewish national home. And that was actually the purpose that the League of Nations gave this land to Britain, because it was understood that this is before the Holocaust, mind you. This is after World War I, not after World War II. And after World War I, the idea was that the Jews would be allowed to settle in this area because it was their ancient homeland. And there had always been a Jewish presence, even after the Romans expelled them and renamed the place Palestine. There are some Jews who never left. And so the idea that the Arabs had this land or Palestinians had this land, these are historical fictions. The Arabs had it back in the 7th century when they conquered it, and then the Ottomans conquered it from them. And they're Turks, not Arabs. And that was who it was ruled by, but the Ottomans gave it up. So if you want to ask who was the occupier, I mean, who owned the land that the Israelis are illegally occupying? Nobody does, except Israel. The mandate for Palestine that the League of Nations gave to Britain was actually made up of what is today Israel, what is today Jordan. And then the British, because they actually hated the Jews, they took the whole eastern part of it that is now Jordan and gave it to the Arabs to placate the Arabs. And then the western part was supposed to be the Jewish national home. That's Israel, including Gaza, including what is called the West Bank, which is the heart of the Jewish homeland, Judea and Samaria. And this was, therefore, the land that, according to international law, because the League of Nations went into the United Nations, and this is universally recognized, that land belongs to Israel by right. It's not occupied territory. And there's no Palestinian people that ever existed there or ever had a kingdom or a republic or an empire there, and they have no claim on it.
Now, I'm unfamiliar with some of what you just said. So for anyone who's confused right now, Robert, there are actually people in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank. There's a bunch of people there. So
Yeah.
those people are called Palestinians. Who
Right.
who were they actually? You're just saying they were just like random people, part of the Ottoman Empire or something like that?
Yeah, in the Ottoman Empire, they were known as South Syrians, and that was South Syria, the whole area there. They're Arabs. They are not ethnically, linguistically, culturally, or religiously different from the Arabs of Syria or Jordan. They're just more Arabs of that area. There's not a separate Palestinian Arab nationality.
Well, one second, AP, because we obviously both have questions here, but a quick follow up on that one. So, Robert, you're saying that the identity of a Palestinian people was made because if you're just part of a bigger group that is in multiple countries, you can say, hey, well, you should be absorbed by those countries. That's who you are. Mm-hmm. Therefore, to avoid that and to make sure that there's this ongoing local conflict, you have to say, no, these are a specific people group who have this territory and were pushed off their land by Jews, and therefore they're freedom fighters getting it back.
Yeah, there's plenty more that can be said about this. In the first place, they weren't pushed off their land. And so I think we should cover that first. But I mean, there's so much more to this, David. But there's one thing that this is something that's often said, that people think that the Jews came in and seized the land and kicked out the Arabs. This did not happen. What happened was there was the Zionist movement that increased the Jewish presence in this area. But this was not something that was done this was actually done with the Jews coming in and buying territory that was sold to them on a legitimate basis. And then the Arabs launched numerous pogroms to massacre the Jews and frighten them into leaving. And they didn't leave. And then what happened was, when Israel was declared a state, the Arab Higher Committee told the Arabs to leave the area so that they would be able to kill all the Jews, destroy Israel, and the Arabs would not be in the line of fire, and then they could come back once Israel was destroyed. You doubt this? I got it all in here. I've got documented evidence of the Arab Higher Committee in 1948 urging the Arabs to leave, in a Jordanian daily called Palestine in 1949, says the Arab state encouraged the Palestine Arabs to leave their homes temporarily in order to be out of the way of the Arab invasion armies. Notice that it says Palestine Arabs, not Palestinian Arabs, because there were no Palestinians yet. Uh, Arab Higher Committee. It must not be forgotten. The Near East Arabic Broadcasting Station, that is, 1949. It must not be forgotten that the Arab Higher Committee encouraged the refugees' flight from their homes in Jaffa, Haifa, and Jerusalem. On and on and on. There's so much documentation of that. It's completely obscured by this myth that the Jews kicked out the Arabs. They left voluntarily because they thought Israel would be destroyed quickly.
So
can I add one thing to that very quickly? I think it's very important. Robert talked about the displacement of the Palestinian Arabs, and there is one event that they often refer to, which is known as the Nakba, the catastrophe of Palestinians or Arabs being displaced from the region. A displacement, whether it was organized or not, did take place, but it wasn't just the displacement that happened because the Jews wanted to come in there and remove all the Arabs. It didn't happen because of that. It happened during a war which started because both sides were offered the option to build a state. Israel declared their Israeli state independence. The Arabs didn't accept this, and they didn't have any plan of establishing their own state with the current borders. So they declared war on Israel together with Egypt and Jordan. And as a result of this war, which ended badly for them, which is why they refer to it as a catastrophe, Egypt and Jordan took control of those very lands which were supposed to be turned into a possible Arab state. So there wasn't even a Palestinian or an Arab state distinctly established there. It was Egypt and Jordan that took control of those regions, and the displacement happened because of that very war that the Arabs waged on Israel because they didn't want to accept the existence of a Jewish state in the region.
Yeah, and you'll notice that there was never the slightest peep about we have to have a Palestinian state when Egypt was occupying Gaza and Jordan was occupying Judea and Samaria. Nobody said, hey, there has to be a Palestinian state, because there wasn't any Palestinians yet. And so the agitation for Palestinian self-determination is actually just a disguised jihad against Israel. There's one last thing I got to get in, David. There's very many things that can be said about this, but one thing I think is very important, and that is this, that the Jews started to settle in Palestine in large numbers in the 19th century. And at that time, the area was very desolate and empty. Mark Twain actually toured there, among many other people, and remarked upon how he would go for miles without seeing any human beings at all. And the Arabs, many of the Arabs who are now the indigenous Palestinians, so-called, were actually brought in by the Ottomans at the time of the Zionist surge of Jewish settlement in the area, because they wanted to counter the Jewish presence that was growing there. And so they brought Arabs from all over the Middle East to become the Palestinian Arabs, and now they're the Palestinians. But a lot of their surnames betray that they're actually from Armenia or from Egypt or from the Maghreb, all kinds of areas. Even Yasser Arafat was not a Palestinian, strictly speaking, and many others also. They were brought from elsewhere to counter Zionism.
So just to recap here and make sure I'm understanding this stuff correctly, you can go back not too far. So you're talking the 19th century, and it's a pretty barren land. There are Jews moving there. There were Jews who were always there, just like there were some other people who've been there a long time. But you have Jews from other places in the world moving there. And then the Ottoman Empire sees, oh, Jews are stacking the deck here, sending more and more people here. Therefore, to counteract that, we need to make sure we're sending people down there as well. And so you have Arabs and other groups from other parts of the Ottoman Empire. They're going there now. And then once the land is becoming under the control, so post-World War II, once the land is going to be under the control of the Jews, they're establishing a country and then other countries are claiming they're going to wipe this new country off the map. So they tell the Muslims there, hey, get out of there because we're going to go wipe these people out, and we don't want you to get caught in the crossfire. So they leave, but then the Jews win, and all of a sudden those people who left because they didn't want to be wiped out with the Jews, they say, okay, now we want our land.
Yeah,
back.
we got kicked
guys,
out.
we were just kidding, guys.
And I got to tell you, David, there are a lot of people. I'm looking at the comments here. There are a lot of jihad allies and anti-Semites and such in the comments. So I just want to say, you will find documentation. You will find abundant proof of everything I'm saying and much more in the book, The Palestinian Delusion. I challenge anybody who is watching this to disprove even one thing in that book. You know, people can call me all the names they want, but they've never disproved a single thing that I have said. And you can, all of this is the way that it actually happened, contrary to the lies that the propagandists are feeding you every day.
And
Robert,
so that book once again is titled The Palestinian Delusion, because we do have some requests for the there you have it.